Hello, this is Kelly with Books I'm Not Reading, and I'm here today to do the My Favorite Writers tag. You already know the story. Alex from What Page Are You On made a video, and then Steve Donahue took it and turned it into a tag in which he tagged the entire world. My husband, Jason, from Old Blues Chapter and Verse, did the tag and tagged me. And so even though I'm terribly behind in tags, I felt like since my husband tagged me, I should probably go ahead and do this one. I will say these are my favorite writers. That does not mean they are my favorite books, because I had to find a way to narrow the scope down. So I went through my book journal, which starts in 1996. And every author on here, I have read more than one of their books. I did not include any YA, and yeah, so if you think about like the Pulitzer Project, where I read all the Pulitzer books, well, very few of those people have I read more than one book by, or if I have, I maybe didn't like the other things I read. So it's a little bit different list. I don't think I'm going to spend a ton of time talking about my actual top 5 favorite writers, because I think you will probably be able to figure them out. If you've been watching this channel for any length of time, you're going to know who they are. So, all right, we're going to start with the first category, which is not quite. So they almost made the list, but just not quite there. So the first person I'm going to talk about is Shane Claiborne. This book is called Executing Grace: How the Death Penalty Killed Jesus and Why It's Killing Us. He also wrote a great book called The Irresistible Revolution, and he is part of kind of the social justice gospel movement in America, and he's a terrific writer, and I think a really important voice in terms of religious nonfiction at the moment. So may not be somebody that you're familiar with, but The Irresistible Revolution, I think, is a really great starting point if you're interested in reading anything by Shane Claiborne. So next up is Steinbeck. This is our folio edition, of course, of The Grapes of Wrath. And I read 2 other Steinbeck books in high school. I believe I read Of Mice and Men and The Pearl. I really didn't like The Pearl, so that's kind of why he's on here in this category. I would really like to read East of Eden, and I think that would probably boost Steinbeck up a little bit, but The Grapes of Wrath is just, wow, fantastic book. So next on my list is Margaret Atwood. I've read 3 books by Margaret Atwood. I've read The Handmaid's Tale, Oryx and Crake, and The Blind Assassin. And this is why she's on the list, because I love this book. I think it's brilliant. I think it's such a fascinating plot. I don't even really know how to categorize, like, what kind of book this is. Is it science fiction? Is it literary fiction? Like, where would this book fall? But I need to read it again, as with so many other people on this list. Next is Timothy Egan. He's my nonfiction writer on here. Earlier this year I read The Immortal Irishman, and in the past I've read The Worst Hard Time and The Big Burn. Everything that he writes, it feels like a novel. I would recommend any of his books if you're looking for what you're going to read for nonfiction November. He's just tremendous, very thorough, but really feels like narrative journalism, narrative nonfiction. So this was so hard to put on the not quite. This is The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. So the other book by Tim O'Brien that I've read is Going After, and I've never known quite how to say this, but Going After Cacciato, I'm not quite sure. I did not like that book. although everyone else in my book club loved it. But The Things They Carried is one of my all-time favorite books. So, and I also really need to read more of his work. And finally, and again, this was also really painful, Elizabeth Gaskell is on my not quite. And that's because I absolutely love North and South, but I can't deny that there are some flaws with it. And I don't want to start a controversy right before Victober, but I did not like Wives and Daughters at all. So, yeah. This one is one to cherish, and I will reread this in the future because I just absolutely loved it. But, yeah, so some of our other stuff. Okay, then we get to the maybes. The first one is John Le Carre, never quite sure how to say it. I started off by reading Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy by him, and since then I've read the next book in the Carla trilogy, which is The Honorable Schoolboy. I've also read Spy Who Came In From the Cold and another George Smiley one, I can't remember. But I've also read The Pigeon Tunnel. This is a really, really wonderful read, and I just loved learning more about his life. So, great book. Next up is Betty Smith. I absolutely love A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, and I've also read Joy Comes in the Morning. I think that's the right title. I have not read Maggie Now, so I'm planning to reread this and Joy in the Morning in 2020, and then for the first time read Maggie Now, because I absolutely love Betty Smith. Next up, Maud Hart Lovelace. Okay, so we could argue that this goes against my YA or young reader, having a young reader category in my favorite writers list. I don't think all of Maud Hart Lovelace's books are necessarily would appeal to a younger audience. Things like Betsy's Wedding, I'm not sure. I could be wrong, but these are classic. These were before there were very many books out there for young people. So anyway, we've been reading these all year long. Finally, on my maybe list is Nick Hornby. This is probably my favorite novel by him, about a boy. I think when it comes to fiction, Nick Hornby is a little hit or miss. So maybe he should have been on the not quite, but he made it to the maybes, frankly, because of his nonfiction, which I've done an entire video on these books. It starts off with The Polysyllabic Spree, Housekeeping versus the Dirt, Shakespeare Wrote for Money, and More Baths, Less Talking. You can also find all of these compiled into one book with a few extra essays in a book called 10 Years in the Tub. But these are his essays from The Believer magazine or his columns, and they're fantastic. I love them. They make me laugh out loud. They're just great. So great. So that's why he kind of got boosted up. All right. Finally, the top 5. In number 5, we have Wallace Stegner. I love Stegner. People classify him as a Western writer of some kind, but he's just a great writer. Drives me crazy when people get kind of boxed in. There's a reason his books are Penguin classics. Angle of Repose I've actually read twice, and then I've also read Crossing to Safety. And in truth, I feel like they're books that I probably should read once every 10 years or once every, I need to keep reading them again and again because there's so much in them, and you can see how your own life has changed and how your life having changes your reading of the book. I hope that makes sense. But I love Stegner. I think he's really underrated. I wish more people were reading him and talking about him. Number 4, which I know we've spent a lot of time talking about this guy lately on this channel, but is Shakespeare. This is Hamlet, which I read this year. Just blew my mind, as did Winter's Tale. So Shakespeare he just has to be in the top 5. In number 3, this is one writer that I just don't understand why she has not won the Pulitzer Prize, but it's Louise Erdrich. Love Medicine, I think, is a perfect book. I also loved Plague of Doves. In college, I read Tracts, which at the time, I'm not really sure I was ready to read that book, so that might be something that I revisit. She has a lot of other books, though, that I haven't read. All right, and then we get to the real obvious ones. In second place is Charles Dickens, the star copy of Bleak House, which I think is just an absolute masterpiece. I really don't understand how someone could weave so many different storylines into one cohesive book, but I think it's absolutely brilliant. I'm also a huge fan of The Pickwick Papers, which again is a book that I feel like is a little bit flawed. I feel like reading The Pickwick Papers, it's almost like watching Dickens learn how to write the novel. So I may do a special Dickens video during Victober. We'll see if I have time for that or not. But yeah, Charles Dickens is definitely one of my favorite writers, and I'm so excited that he wrote so much because I have a lot to look forward to. And I'm really glad that Jason persuaded me to give him another chance. I read Great Expectations in college, and I had a terrible teacher, so he kind of spoiled Dickens for me, although I still read A Christmas Carol probably almost every year. And finally, again, in number 1, no surprise, the one, the only, Jane Austen. So I do need to reread. I need to start rereading these. So I read Lady Susan, The Watsons, and Sanditon earlier this year, but I think I've read Northanger Abbey in the last year. But things like Sense and Sensibility, Emma, Mansfield Park, I need to read them all again. So I just need to get into a cycle where every year I choose another novel by Jane. So a ton of people are doing this tag right now. If you want to do this tag, please go for it. Let me know. I would love to watch your video of it. I need to watch more of the ones that have already been done. So thanks, Jace, for tagging me in this video. Now I'm gonna have to put all these books away. All right, you guys, remember to be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and I will talk to you soon. Take care, BookTube.